Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Crossover U College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find right here on the Crossover channel. My name's Kanaye, and I'm joined with Josh. And today, we're just going to be having a conversation regarding the best players on some of our favorite teams across the country. Really, we're just going to throw some team names out there, and maybe we'll agree, maybe we'll disagree, and have a little bit of a discussion as to who we think the best player on whatever college program we name, who the best player on that team is, and pretty much just give our thoughts regarding that going into this next college basketball season. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please, as always, engage with our content any way you can, whether it's liking our videos, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people about it. Really does help with being able to get these videos out to a larger audience. So let's get right into it. I figure it's probably worth starting at the top of who we think is probably going to be the number one team in the country going to next year. Pick your choice between Purdue and Houston.
I'm going to go Houston. And before we talk about the main player, I do want to add, just because they are the main scoring option or the highest scorer on the team doesn't mean that they are the best player. We're looking for overall talent and the ability to lead the team. Just because you're the guy with the insane scoring ability doesn't mean that you are the best guy. Maybe you're just the person with the ball the most. Doesn't mean that bad guy. And that's pretty true, I would say, with Houston. I kind of don't know who that can be. I personally think Emmanuel Sharp will be the best scorer on the team and will probably score the most, but I don't think it's going to be him. That's the best player. I kind of want to lean towards maybe, I don't want to say Chris Knack just because he is a freshman.
Right.
And Houston kind of uses its guards a lot more. I think Miles Uzan is my pick right now.
Yeah, I also am going to go Miles Uzan too. It definitely is very, very tempting to pick one of the five-star freshmen that are incoming to that Houston Cougars program to play for Kelvin Sampson this upcoming year. But I will say, I do think that I was definitely up in the air about choosing Emmanuel Sharp as well, just considering I think he does have a really, really big chip on his shoulder going to this year, just considering how that last play I did in the national championship with him kind of fumbling the ball. But going back to Miles Uzan, I definitely think you look at Houston a lot differently if Miles Uzan stays in the draft this year as opposed to him returning. And I just think the gravity that he has as one of the leaders of that program is so important. And while he might not be the leading scorer on that team, I think he does so much for them playmaking wise and defensively that I think all around he is their best player.
Definitely. Do you give any love to JoJo Tugler or Isaiah Harwell?
JoJo Tugler, I definitely think deserves a lot of love. But I look at him more so in with among his defensive prowess as opposed to what he can bring to the table offensively. I do think there is a lot of work he needs to do this offseason, which I'm sure he has, and Kelvin Sampson has been firm with him on regarding his offensive potential and being able to kind of upgrade his game in that aspect. But I think he's going to be a really important anchor of the defense alongside Chris Knack, those guys handling down low. I do think there is a world where he's the best player, but I would still give it to Milos.
Yeah, I would. Now can we stay in the Big 12 and move over to Utah, talk about the Cougars at BYU?
Yeah, definitely. BYU is a really, really interesting scenario where you have who me and Josh think is the number one prospect in this incoming freshman class in AJ DeBansa. He, of course, 5-star prospect coming in. He has a chance to be really, really good. I do very much see the similarities between him and Cooper Flagg and their style of play. Do I think he's going to have the season Cooper Flagg did? Probably not. I'm not ruling it out. But then you also have Richie Saunders, who is their leading scorer from last year, was insane in Big 12 play where he shot the ball so efficiently. It's tough. In terms of who's a better college player going in, I lean towards Richie just because of the experience. But better pro prospects is definitely DeBansa. I honestly might lean towards Richie here.
I'm honestly very high in DeBansa, so I'm taking him. And once again, this is why I mentioned it beforehand. The best scorer or the highest scorer doesn't automatically mean they are the best player. I think DeBansa is a lot more athletic, has a lot more of a skill set, and his ranking does show. I think Kevin Young is going to use him perfectly. He might not be the guy to always have the ball in his hands, but when he does, you know he's going to score. You know he's going to be effective, and you know he's going to lead that team. So that's kind of like, I'm very stuck on him. No offense to Saunders, but even last year, I didn't feel like he was that much of the main factor. I get it once again. He was the lead scorer, but it felt not so much on him to be the leading guy.
That's fair. I think the way I look at it is, granted, I think AJ DeBansa is a much, much better incoming freshman than Egor Demin this past year. but they had that, of course, top 10 projected pick the entire year. And I will say, Igor was a little disappointing at times throughout the season for BYU. And Richie kind of just stepped up and came out of nowhere. And I just think that there is an adjustment period for freshmen in every college basketball season. And I think Debanza might hit a little bit of a roadblock at the beginning, especially getting into Big 12 play. And just Richie has that experience. And I think that that might give him the edge there.
Yeah, and it definitely is a big deal. I mean, you did talk about him really coming out of nowhere. The year before that, he averaged under 10 a game, and here he is averaging 16 and a half last year. I don't know if it's going to increase, decrease, stay the same, but I know he's definitely a guy to watch out for. But I kind of just feel like Debanza is just the best player on this team. And maybe that's just me being overhyped on the freshman, but that's just kind of where my life is right now. With
Yeah.
viewing players with younger caliber talent versus older experience, but they've been with the program.
Right. I definitely hear you out there. Going back towards the top, going to the Big Ten, who do you think is the best player on Purdue going to this year?
I'm going to lean towards Braden Smith. This is kind of a different argument from the BYU one. You're going to want to probably go with experience here. I do like the other options surrounding him. TKR will probably average more points, but Braden Smith could arguably average a double-double for all I know this year. He's a player of the year candidate. He's in honestly, his prime as a college player, and this is going to be a completely stacked squad. That said, though, I'll open the floor up for a guy like Oscar Clough.
Yeah, I definitely think Oscar Clough definitely has a chance to break out and be like a 15-7 guy on any given night. I do lean towards Braden, one, because he is the returning first team All American, reigning Bob Cousy Award winner. I just think the experience, again, is going to show someone who played at Purdue for 3 years, going on 4, as opposed to Oscar Clough, who's just coming over. TKR, I'm sure, is going to average close to 20, if not more, once again this year. But again, Braden Smith has a chance to be the National Player of the Year. And what he does, playmaking wise, has a chance to break. I think he is on pace to break the all-time assist record, passing Magic Johnson, for the NCAA, which is just insane. So I would probably definitely go Braden there.
Yeah, and I would say this is kind of more of it's not a close race. I think there are multiple players who could take that role, but Smith has always been persistent. Last year, he was that main guy by a long shot, and it definitely showed. They made that Sweet 16 almost an Elite Eight had they beat that Houston team. Regardless, though, the reload was great, and I think Smith has, in a way, a chip on his shoulder for not making it further and for not making it in the national championship 2 years back, and he wants to be that guy in his last year as a Boilermaker.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Now, Florida. Who do you think is the best player on the Florida
This
game?
is a good one. Honestly, this is a pretty wide open one. I kind of lean towards Boogie Fland. Florida's been very, very faithful to their transfer point guards. We saw that with Clayton last year. I think Fland kind of just has a way with him in terms of just how convincing he was last year and the fact that he came back and within 2 days of him leaving the portal goes to Florida. There's just something about the way he did that so quickly and so determinedly that is so convincing that he knows he's going to be given the ball a lot more than he was at Arkansas. And he already was given the ball a ton there. He was already a great scorer and a decent passer. So I kind of feel like he's going to be the guy leading the offense most of the time, taking the ball down the court. I can see Condon, I can see Howe, I can see Lee. It's definitely an open race compared to last year, obviously. But Flan he has that SEC style energy that works so well.
Right. It's really unique just how you can go in so many different ways with who you think the best player on Florida is going to be this season. Of course, you mentioned Boogie Fland. They brought in Xavier Lee, so that's important to consider. The thing with both those guys in the backcourt is it's so hard for me to overlook how bad Boogie Fland or how bad Arkansas was when Boogie Fland was healthy at the start of SEC play this past year. And with that being said, I think Boogie Fland's going to be a lot better this year at Florida than he was last year at Arkansas. But again, that stretch is really hard for me to ignore. On top of that, Xavier Lee is coming over from Princeton, which is, of course, an Ivy League school. And there's an adjustment point that he's probably going to have to go through where he's playing higher level competition. He's playing against bigger guys, more physical than when he was facing Princeton. And he took a lot of tough shots at Princeton. Those shots are only going to get tougher in the SEC, which is probably going to end up being the best conference in the country once again this year. For those reasons, I kind of lean towards Howe. Thomas Howe this past year obviously came off the bench, played a really important role for them, being that first guy off the bench, being the glue guy, made a lot of big winning plays down the stretch of a lot of games in the NCAA tournament. I view him very similarly to the situation that Donovan Clayton was in at UConn where his freshman year. He came off the bench, had moments in the NCAA tournament, and the next year returned was a starter. Maybe didn't have the season that a lot of people thought he was going to have in terms of production stats wise, but was really important nonetheless, becoming arguably the best defensive big in the country that year in his sophomore season. Thomas Howell is going to be probably playing the three, as Todd Golden's come out and said, which is really interesting, just considering I believe he's around 6'10". I do think he needs to improve as a ball handler for him to be in that type of a role, but I think the mold is there for him to kind of fill that role of having a dynamic scoring wing where he can score at three levels. He's going to have a lot of mismatches being a 6'9", 6'10" guy playing at the three. And I think he's going to be able to take advantage of a lot of that. He's really good in transition, great playmaker out of the post. And I honestly do think that he might end up being the All-American watch kind of guy on this Florida roster this next year.
Now, I will ask, who do you think will average the most points per game?
I think Boogie Fland might average the most points on this team. I think one of him or Xavier Lee averages the most. But in terms of what Thomas Howell's going to bring rebounding the ball and playmaking again out of the post, I would lean towards Howe being the just all-around best player.
I could definitely feel that. Now, do you want to can we stay in the SEC and look over to Auburn? What do you think about them?
I think Tahad's going to be the best player on this team. He could have been a first-round pick if he stayed in the draft this past year, was the best player on the floor in those combine runs. Really just great scoring performances he had in those combine games. And of course, he came off the bench this past year, averaged 11 points, added 3 assists to that. Now he's going to be in a starting role as the lead point guard for Bruce Pearl this year. He's the only returnee, and he has all the experience. He knows how to execute the offense to the degree Bruce Pearl wants it to be done. And Todd shows up for the big games. Almost every big game, maybe outside the Final Four against Florida this past year, Todd showed up. And I just think having a guy that's so good at breaking guys down off the dribble and getting to his spots, elevating the mid-range, hitting the tough off movement, off the dribble threes, something that I think it's so hard to come by in college basketball, and having a guy that so consistently can show up for the moment and hit those type of shots. Of course, you're bringing over Keyshawn Hall, who was the leading scorer in the Big 12 this past year, but I do think he's going to be in a slightly reduced role than compared to the amount of touches he got at UCF this past season. So I would probably lean to Hod.
Yeah, I'm honestly leaning him too. I don't hate the option of choosing, honestly, any of the Keyshawns or even taking that swing at Elijah Freeman, who was very good at the D2 level and gives that Chad Baker Mazzara energy. To Hod, there's a great ceiling for the guy. He honestly gives me hope in a way that Auburn could have another Johnny Broom level scorer. I think there's definitely options beyond him if that doesn't work out. We've seen sophomore slumps in the past, but this is a great risk to take for a guy like Hod to come back, knowing that, obviously, as Kanaye mentioned, he's the only returner, but also the only guy who was on that Final Four team. He has the experience, he has the grit, and he's got good moves. I mean, I'm not trying to really put anything on him, but you saw that video of him on the beach juking out the this is a guy that will always be out there trying to show off. You want guys like this on your court on a given basis, and I just think that beyond the scoring, he's just a great playmaker, and that's what you want for a guy like him and for Auburn in general.
Someone who I definitely have on first team All-American watch. Definitely be on the lookout for when we put those preseason All-American teams out. Might as well stick around in the SEC here. Who do you think the best player on Kentucky will be this year?
This is a fun one. This is kind of, I wouldn't say it's a similar scenario to Hod. Otega Owe is coming back, one of the few returners on this squad, and average, I think, the most points per game. I don't want to say he was the main guy on this team. I think, once again, this was more of a group effort between him, Robinson, Maya, Butler. But Owe was always there, and he was probably the most consistent person, other than, I guess, Kobe Bryant with his three-point shooting. But you got to add in people like Jaden Acquaintance, Jalen Love, Aberdeen, even freshmen like Jasper Johnson into this conversation. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to lead Otega Owe, but Jalen Love. Jalen Love is a name I'm not going to forget, and I don't think you should either. He is like the model point guard for Kentucky right now. Like, he can step up in the moment, and I get it. Pitt is not exactly the place you want to compare it to with Kentucky, but he can definitely be a 15-point per game guy at Kentucky. He's a guy I see a lot of future in.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned Jalen Lowe and Jaden Acquaintance, because I do think if they get the version of Jalen Lowe at the beginning of this past year at Pitt, before he pretty much decided midway through the season that he was going to be transferring from Pitt and kind of stopped maybe trying as much in some of the games. If they can get that version of Jalen Lowe, then Kentucky's going to be really, really good. And I do lean towards Otega. I am going to come out and say I think Otega is going to be the best player on this team this year. But I definitely feel that Kentucky's in a lot better of a situation than, I mean, if Otega's one of their best players, not the best. I think if Otega ends up being a first-team All-American, then that means Kentucky was way too reliant on Otega and his scoring output this year than they probably should be if they want to make a Final Four and win a national championship game. Now, that being said, I'm not ruling out the possibility of them being that good with Otega as their best player, but I think, again, they're in a lot better situation if Jaden Quaintance comes along and develops into being a really, really good big for them down low. If Jalen Lowe can do everything he did scoring-wise at Pitt, on top of adding some additional playmaking to the already strong 5 assists he averages past season at Pitt, then once again, I think Kentucky's going to be in a lot better situation to compete to get to a Final Four.
Yeah, and it really does depend. I honestly think that in this world, it could flip-flop. There could be an early part of the season where it's Otega away, and Jalen Love is getting used to his time at Kentucky. He's getting used to the change environment, getting used to the SEC. And when the time comes, he pops off. Even Quaintance, for reference as well, because he's going to be injured at the start of the season. He needs to be relied on the same way that, for example, Lamont Butler was relied on at Kentucky last year. I think that there's kind of a way for him to sneak into that conversation. But I kind of agree with you, Kanaye. I'm leading Otega just to be safe, but I'm not leaving up on Jalen.
Yeah. Now let's go over to the Big East. Who do you think the best player on St. John's will be this year?
This is a fun one. This is another fun one. It's kind of like Kentucky in a way. There are multiple guys who can take this role. I'm going to go with Zuby in the same way I chose Otega. You have consistency. You have the ability to score regularly. And you have the experience of being on the team. That said, hear me out, Ian Jackson. I get it. He's never played point the way that he's going to this year. He's new to this. He's going to his sophomore season. There's a lot of growth in that. And there's a lot of opportunity in him, too. He's playing under one of the best coaches of all time in Pitino. Pitino's never been shy to train his point guards. And I think that there's a great opportunity for him. And we can talk about Hopkins if you really want, but I'm gonna go with Ejiofor, but not by much. Ian Jackson has a lot to say with that.
I'm also going to go Ejiofor for pretty much all the reasons you said. That being said, I love how you brought up Ian Jackson because I do think for St. John's to be able to make a Final Four and win a national championship, Ian Jackson has to be their best player. Guard play is so important in college basketball, in all of basketball, at any level. And I think for St. John's to be able to go on the run that a lot of people think that they can, Ian Jackson's going to have to be that guy at point. He's going to have to handle the Big East. He's going to have to be a much better both playmaker and defender, which I'm sure Pitino is hammering away at right now. That I'm probably, as we speak, I wouldn't be shocked they're in the practice room right now. Rick Pitino's yelling his head off at Ian right now about not running something right. But again, I think Ian Jackson has all the tools to be a really good point guard. It's just a matter of if he is able to do that kind of conversion from being more of an off guard into being someone who's on the ball for most of the game. I think one of him or Joe Sansanan is going to have to be their best player for them to be able to make a far march. But I still lean Zuby. He's pretty much he is the only returning starter for Rick Pitino, and he has all the tools to be the Big East Player of the Year and a first-team All-American in my eyes.
Now, how are you going to view Bryce Hopkins? Because he only played 3 games last year, but we know his potential.
Yeah, Bryce Hopkins is a really good player when he's healthy. I think he could have played more than 3 games this past year at Providence. I probably figured that in order for him to get the medical red shirt, it's probably a good idea to sit out a lot of those games. So, unfortunately for the Providence Friars, he kind of robbed them of whatever it was, $750,000, close to $1 million. I forget what his deal was in Friartown, but when he's healthy, he's really good. That being said, I do think he's a little bit of a streaky player at times, but I would definitely still lean towards one of Ian Jackson or Zuby Ejiofor.
Yeah, listen, personally, Bryce Hopkins could lead the team in scoring. He has a 20 per game ceiling, in my opinion. The way he plays, and if he's anything like he was sophomore year, there is that spark in him. And keep in mind, and no offense to Providence, St. John's is a far smarter, more development-based system. We saw that with R.J. Lewis in the past 2 years. He really grew a lot into his position. I think Hopkins can kind of do that in his 1 year here. And once again, you're under Pitino. That's a development-based coach. He likes to develop his players a lot and quickly, too. So I don't want to put him out of the argument, but we don't have a lot to go with. We have 3 games from last year and like 15 from the year before that. If he's healthy, though, he's going to be insane. And I really hope he is.